when we think about it, we are to cultivate a lifestyle of mission. If we are followers of Christ, being on mission is a part of who we are as followers of Christ.
Well, every week we bring to you people who have really a wonderful God at work story to tell, and that's no different this week. Joining us this week is Charity McCloud. She is the new Resource Global City Director in Los Angeles. But before we get to that, first we want to welcome Charity to the program and podcast, and then we're going to learn a little bit about her faith journey. Charity, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Colin. I'm really excited and honored to be here.
Let's talk about that faith journey. Tell us a little bit about your growing up years and how you came to know the Lord.
Yes, so I am a Los Angeles native through and through, born and raised in Los Angeles, actually born into the church and into ministry. I don't remember life without being at church. And so I have a rich legacy and history when it comes to my family and being not just in and attending church, but being heavily involved in church. So I grew up in Los Angeles, closer to the South Central area, and was born into Crenshaw Christian Center, a pretty large ministry within the South LA area. And that's under the leadership of Apostle Frederick Casey Price. And then, and so like I said, I don't know life without being in church. And so whether that's, kids ministry, whether that's, kids choir, dance ministry, and I was able to see my father, who worked in the ministry, actually just retired of 40 years of formal ministry this past June. And so, like I said, being heavily involved and really just having a good up close glimpse of walking with Christ and faith and missions. It's interesting, as I grew up and went on to college and started having opportunities to do missions trips for myself. My dad and I kind of had a heart-to-heart moment, and I think it kind of hit him that I stepped into that space without him really pushing me into that space, but him me just seeing him and the work that he did over the years. I
wanted to talk a little bit about that move into mission or ministry, because certainly growing up in the church, some people just, I'm going to become an accountant, or I'm going to become a teacher, and ministry and mission is not necessarily part of that. But you just started to explain that really was something that began to hit your heart at an early age. Was it your dad that moved you that way, even though maybe he wasn't saying, "Hey, I want you to do this," but it was just that example? Were there other things that led you to feel that ministry or mission was going to be part of your future?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think one, it was when I was 10, my mother passed suddenly of what's called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, essentially a loss of oxygen to the heart. And that, obviously traumatic, but I think it was my being rooted in church that allowed me to process that, in a very healthy way. For the most part, I think any child who loses their mother at 10 might have some, opportunities to lash out and be angry. But I think that being rooted really helped my processing and development. And I also was able to really have leadership from my home church kind of pour into me and pour into my peers when it came to missions. And there was one Sunday that I will never forget, and I can't remember what the guest said, but Terry Mize came and spoke at Crenshaw Christian Center one Sunday. And, if you know anything about Terry Mize, like huge missionary background and love for people, across the globe. And he said something that just stirred my heart in that moment. And it was really at that point that was kind of the catalyst for me wanting to go into missions. I think my background, even professionally, has always been in a very nonprofit space, ministry space. And so I've always really had a heart for service and a heart for people. And I really never saw myself going into formal ministry per se. I think it was just the leading of in the promptings of the Holy Spirit. And I'm kind of one to where if I get something, I'm just going to go for it and try it and see where it takes me. And that has typically worked out for me very well.
Yeah, I love that. Talk for a minute about you said there was this kind of missions experience, not only at the event where the speaker came in, but that your dad began to see you kind of have an interest in missions. Did you, at an
Yeah.
early age or college age, ever go on any mission trips? Did
Hmm.
you start a process of engaging in
Yeah.
missions at that point?
Right after that Sunday that Terry Mize spoke, there actually were some mission opportunities that came right after that. So it was almost like God was like priming my heart to be ready for these opportunities. And yeah, my first missions, short-term missions opportunity globally was to South Africa and specifically Namibia as well. And that I think was a really eye-opening experience for me because I do believe that I think um, a lot of rhetoric and I think expectations around, especially short-term mission trips outside of where you normally live, can tend to bring a sense of I'm bringing something to a group of people. And what I very quickly found out was I learned a lot more than I gave. And I believe that's just how the Holy Spirit does it and how God does it. And He will, a lot of the times, one, show you some things about yourself that you never, really thought about, but also two, will put a demand to draw things out. And so I learned way, way, way more from the experience, from the people. And, I came back from that first time just frustrated, frustrated in the sense of I've had this amazing experience, but like there's so much more to everyday life than what we're going through. And so that was really kind of the catalyst for my journey there
Yeah.
afterwards.
It's amazing to see what we get from mission activity versus what we
Hmm.
give. I love that you shared that because I think I've experienced that every time I've gone
Yeah.
anywhere, and I've had the
Hmm.
privilege to go to a lot of different places around the world, and always I come back, I believe, more enriched myself than
Yeah.
I've been able to enrich others in that process. Though I go wanting to engage and give and serve as much as possible, but still the Lord seems to pile it on me, and
Yes.
I learned so much in those experiences. Um,
Yeah.
was there anything in that trip that just hit you that you just thought, I just can't believe this, or I wasn't expecting this, or even in anything maybe that directed your path moving forward? You came back and said you were a little frustrated because of what you
Yeah.
experienced. Did that help direct which direction you moved?
Yeah, I think it did. Just in the, I think it really um, focused me on wanting to serve people in general. A lot of the um, uh, outreaches that we did, or let me say, a lot of our agenda included service-based outreaches, and I think those were really pivotal for me in kind of just seeing, you know, my natural ability to jump into those spaces and to not be afraid to jump into those spaces and really wanting, the best for people, um, regardless of their current situation. And I feel the same when it comes to LA. And I love, love, love my city. I've had the opportunity to grow up, but also attend schools in different areas. I have worked in different areas of the city. I've had just exposure throughout LA County, and I've gotten to see LA in different facets. And I've also had the opportunity to be in very multicultural, multi-ethnic spaces from a very young age. And all of those things, including those short-term missional opportunities, really led me to where I am today and wanting to unify, wanting to serve, wanting to, yeah, all of that has definitely played a role in that.
I know for a period of time you worked with young adults at the Crenshaw Christian Center, which is
Yeah.
where you said you grew up. Talk for a moment, maybe
hmm
a thing or two you learned during that experience of working with young adults there.
Yeah, I was working with young adults as a young adult. That was, I think, from a leadership perspective, an interesting dynamic to not only lead peers, to lead your own peers. Um, but I really just saw a hunger. And I think that's where I learned the sense of community in its true essence, was during that period of doing life together. And I think, especially during those pivotal years after college, it can be easy to separate. And I think some, youth experience that, whether that's in high school or in college themselves, but especially when they come back of, okay, like I have this faith, but then I want to do other life on the side, and it's really no different. And so I think that's where I really learned the sense of true community and doing life together with those who are also believers, and engaging those that might not be, but because they have and see a sense of community, are easily able to wrap around others, and bring them into the community because they see something different and they see something that's unique to what's happening, maybe in their own space and world.
Seems that young people, especially today, maybe for many years, but especially today, seem to have a better grasp of community often than parents and grandparents do. And I love that piece of the next generations and the importance of community. We're meant to do life together. We're meant to do
We
church
are.
together. And
Yeah.
so those community pieces are so important. I'm glad to hear that. Well, how did you transition to being from that to being missions director at Reality Church LA?
Yeah. So while I was actually, working with the young adults at Crenshaw Christian Center, I, during the day, or in my 9 to 5 professionally, was working with an organization called Claire's Health. And Claire's Health is a community-based organization that focuses on sexual health and really bringing clarity to women and families in really dark, difficult times, whether that's through pregnancy or adoption, etc. And so working in that space, and through that organization, I actually went on another medical missions opportunity to Uganda, and connected with some additional uh, members of the team that weren't a part of our organization, but had some medical background that was used on the trip. And they attended Reality LA, and we got connected. And it was just a season of transition for me. And so they, said, "Hey, we're looking for a local missions director at the time." And so I applied, and I think that was at a point where I believe God was kind of just settling me to really focus on LA, focus back home. And yeah, so that worked out to where I was brought on staff. And a couple years later, I think right around or in the initial wake of the pandemic, ended up taking over global as well. Yeah.
Wow. Talk for a moment about that. I mean, here you are, you started out with an interest in missions. You went on some
hmm
mission trips. You were on a mission trip, it sounds like, when you began to kind of make these connections. Now, all of a sudden,
hmm
I'm the local missions person, and then I'm the global missions person.
hmm
What was that like, helping a church kind of navigate where to do and how to do missions?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was, again, community, but in a different space, right? So instead of more of a individual, small community of peers, now we're talking about a community of partners, whether that's nonprofit partners, ministries that are serving people. So it's really just another extension of community. And that is what we really tried to build at Reality, was a community of our partners, where our partners felt seen and our partners felt supported, but also our church could also engage in that community of not just learning about different organizations that are supporting and serving people in very unique ways, but also to getting involved in that work. And for us, you know, LA is such a big, dense city, and I think to partner with organizations that are already doing the work well, there was no need for us to essentially recreate the wheel, but really come alongside and support those that are in the trenches, and how can we best help those efforts. So we're really just expanding community.
Love the opportunity to talk with people who either are or have been missions directors in local churches. I think so many churches today are adding missions directors because the church maybe has been doing missions for a while, but it's not organized, or there's not a focus, or there's not a directive to do certain things. It can be very haphazard. I've heard talking to many of missions directors, and part of the process often is just getting it organized. And you mentioned local and global, and there's that, how much local do we do? How much global do we do? And what does that look like? One of the things I'd just be interested quickly your feedback on is,
Mhm.
I assume as a mission director, part of what you're doing is not only letting church members know about these organizations that are doing great work and building community, but it's also trying to get them to mobilize, to engage, and do some of the work themselves. Talk for a little bit about that. And is that a challenging thing? Is that difficult, or did you find that people often were very happy to get engaged with whatever was happening in the missions area?
Yeah, I think it is. I think part of it too is perspective and an understanding of what missions is in general. And so oftentimes the language around missions can feel very event based, meaning, okay, I have this missional opportunity, whether it's a short-term trip overseas, whether I go down to the food bank and help serve food. All right, I checked off my missions box, for the year. And that's not biblical. When we think about it, we are to cultivate a lifestyle of mission. If we are followers of Christ, being on mission is a part of who we are as followers of Christ. So I think part of it is really understanding God's true heart and understanding for missions. And then it is equipping people to recognize the spaces and those opportunities within their own everyday life and community. There is absolutely nothing wrong with going outside of maybe your residential area or even workspace to help, but also there is a level of importance to thinking through, hey, like, where has God placed me right now, either where I live, where I work? How can I, either one, is there an organization that our church is partnered with in my area that I can support and connect with? Because if they're in my location, I can more so have a more consistent ongoing relationship and build community with that partner. Or are there things that I see that break my heart when I walk outside of my house, or when I am engaging with my neighbors, that I can, essentially pray about and maybe find a solution to? And so whether that's in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, in our right next to our office. And in terms of, if I'm in this cubicle and I have somebody else right next to me, how can my work and my life and really who I am and how I operate really be the vehicle for missions, rather than finding one-off opportunities to kind of tick off that box, if that makes sense.
Yeah, living a missional life versus just going to mission related events.
Yes.
That's part of it, and part of where we're going to go in just a minute with Resource Global.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, one more question about mission
Mm-hmm.
director or that mission
Mm-hmm.
work you were doing in that. Anything that surprised you? Anything you weren't prepared for? Anything that was just maybe shocking to you about the world or about these relationships and trying to live out your occupation as a missions director?
I don't want to say, I don't think anything surprised me. I think based on different locations or demographics, it can just be a little bit more potentially challenging. Um, whether that's the political climate and how people feel about that, whether that is um, the nature or hustle and bustle of a city. LA is a very busy city. Like, people are in a lot of things. And so I think really being able to slow people down to understand the importance of living a missional lifestyle. So that just paradigm shift is probably on the more challenging side. But yeah, that's probably what I would say.
Yeah. Uh, Tell me a minute about ABC Connect Logistics. I think that's something you did just before we get to Resource Global.
Yeah, so it is a logistics business that my husband, AJ, another friend of ours, Brian, and myself, charity where you get ABC from, started about really in the middle, really as the pandemic hit. So 2020, we launched this logistics business, and one of our main contracts or partners is with Amazon. And so started that, and we all were in very different industries. Our other business partner, Brian, did have some logistic experience, but that really wasn't like a huge career he's had. And so, yeah, we were my husband was praying about this opportunity. And I said, hey, just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? You learn from it. You either it works or it doesn't. But at least you kind of know, you can at least say you tried. And so we did. And almost 4 years later, we're still here. And so we've had the opportunity to start with 5 Amazon vehicles and grow upwards of close to 45 to 50 vehicles during some of the busiest seasons over these last 4 years, and upwards of over 100 employees. And it's been a really sweet space, challenging space, but a sweet space of being able to not only obviously generate revenue, but really to speak into people, our team primarily, and to be able to use the business as an opportunity to serve the community, to serve people. So that's been a really big blessing. Yeah, so still up and running, and we're expanding to contracts outside of Amazon, and looking for unique and innovative ways to not just use the trucking for logistical purposes, but also for service-based opportunities. Yeah, it's been exciting.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, let's talk about, as we wrap our time together up, Resource Global LA. For those
Yes.
who are familiar with Missions Today and what we do every week, you'll hear me say every week as we begin the program that Missions Today is brought to you by Resource Global. They are the organization that own and provide and put out and produce this weekly 26-minute program and podcast. And all over the world, Resource Global
Yeah.
has offices. where people are trained, young people become cohorts in a program. They're trained by uh, older men and women in industry, not only things that will help with their career, but most importantly, trained in their faith and how to integrate
Mhm.
that faith in work and to really see their faith lived out in the workplace. And you started talking about that a little bit with even ABC Connect Logistics that you were doing and ways to use that to serve
Mhm.
others. This office, Resource Global LA, is scheduled to officially kind of get underway in 2025. So you're in that ramping up phase.
Yes.
Tell us about
Yes.
how you got engaged and what your dream is for Resource Global in LA.
Yes, yes. So I'm really honored to be here, and I really got connected to Resource Global through Reality LA, and that was just a really God type of connection. And had a call with Tommy and on a Zoom, and he's explaining to me, and I'm kind of understanding the concept, but I'm loving what I'm hearing so far. But he's just like, hey, why don't you just come to our global conference? And this was last year, so I'm like, oh, okay, sure. Like, I'll just, join you. And went and really was just blown away, I think, by the level of quality teaching, not just on leadership and business, but really on gospel centered identity, and the nuances of that when it comes to the workplace and leadership and business and entrepreneurship. And then being at a table with individuals from Austin and Penang and Nairobi and South Africa, Indonesia, just a well diverse group of individuals at a table, really exchanging ideas and thoughts about some different situations that are taking place within our areas, but also some similarities that we've seen. And so to be able to have those global and cultural exchanges is priceless, I think, to me, especially for someone that has had those same opportunities, but just in kind of like a hodgepodge way of like this short-term opportunity, and but not necessarily having the teaching component mixed in, just piecing it together. So to be a part of a organization that really brings it all together in one space is like, so I absolutely loved that. And that's how I got connected. And I was already transitioning out of reality to something more remote and part time. And because we're, working on the logistics business, I had my son who's 2 now. And so really navigating all of those different life changes, and this kind of just the Lord really brought me into this space. And yeah, I'm excited for LA. I think LA is such a unique place when it comes to just the opportunity for missions. And when I say missions, I'm not saying like, you know, I'm talking about in every area of life. We have we have residents from over 140 countries, bringing over 224 spoken languages, and 26,000 international students attending some form of a LA County school. And so when we think about the missional implications of that is huge. And I read a recent article that came out at the beginning of this month in Forbes talking about a high number of Gen Z and millennials experiencing misalignment burnout. And that's really not being able, they're constantly, you know completing tasks and work that doesn't identify with their true self. And so when we think about that, thinking through, okay, well, if we're engaging with young Christian leaders in the workspace, how can we assist in being aligned with who they are, with who God has called them to be, with their gifts and talents, and especially in a city that's all about the hustle and bustle. Um, how do we focus, and how do we encourage those to not feel like they have to be a part of the rat race, but also provide them with the tools and the mentors and the resources to really bring about change for their own life, but for our city, which hopefully spills over into the world because we are such a global city.
Incredible opportunity. I can't imagine a better city to be doing something like this in. So much diversity and so many people
Yeah.
from all over the world, and so much business and all of that engaged. And
Yes.
the God-centered identity, such a key piece of the resource global model, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding that I'm not my job. I'm an image bearer of God, and He has given me skills and abilities that are to help and serve others, and utilizing that ultimately in the workplace. Another thing we talk about often as well is the fact that, for years there's been this mindset of sacred and secular. The
Mm-hmm.
truth is, for a Christ follower, everything is sacred. You're doing it all,
Mm-hmm.
should be doing it all for Him and for His
Yes.
glory and in service of others. And
Yes.
so when you can begin to incorporate all of your life areas, not just work,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
home and business and all the other things, and put it under His lordship and His control, He's going to give you direction on how to take those steps. And I see some amazing things ahead for you in this city as you begin to take on Resource Global LA, and again launching around 2025. That's going to be exciting. Final
Yeah.
question for you: how can we be praying for you and this startup, if you will, that's
Yeah.
coming next year? How can we best be praying for you?
Yeah. I think praying for the upcoming cohort, for the right individuals to be led to the program. And, I really believe that we don't just want anybody who sees a cool thing or a cool program, but really people who are shepherded because someone else has seen something in them, or the Lord is just really bringing them into this space at that season. And then simultaneously praying for the movement of faith and work in LA, and how leaders of businesses, of organizations, leaders within churches can really support the daily implementation of faith and work for who they lead, right? How can our pastors be really thinking through, a lot of the members that come to our church, that we see them on Sunday, but their work sees them more than we do. You know what I mean? So how can I support? How can I speak into? How can I be discipling and shepherding those that are attending my church to really think differently about their work? And how can I support them in those efforts? And so, as a business leader, as a business owner, how can I really be thinking through creating opportunities for those within my company, those within my organization, to really live out their faith in unique ways, and encouraging individuals that God cares about everything we do. God cares about our work. He cares about the work, regardless of what it is. And so, both the cohort members, but also to just leadership in LA, really coming alongside the faith and work movement as well.
Yeah, and those churches and pastors are such a key. We spend so much time in the workplace training people to live out that faith in the workplace and use that as a mission field. Most of us will never go to the mission field. The majority of people never will, but they're going to a mission field every day in their workplace, and they
Yes,
have that
yes,
opportunity. Well, Charity,
yes.
I'm excited that you have been chosen as the person to take on LA. I have a couple of
Thank
kids.
you.
My son and daughter-in-law live in the area, and I know that it's an incredible city, and just amazing opportunities ahead for you. We'll be praying and ask our team here to pray for you as well
Thank
as you
you.
push toward the launch in 2025. Charity McCloud, Resource Global city director for Los Angeles. Official launch in 2025. They're starting to look for people to participate even now. Be praying for them. Charity, thanks so much for your time. God bless you in all your endeavors.